In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius buried an entire Roman library under 60 feet of volcanic rock, over 1,800 papyrus scrolls, the only intact library from the ancient world, carbonized into brittle black cylinders. Touch them, they crumble. Unroll them, they shatter. For 2,000 years, every attempt to read them destroyed them. Then in 2023, a 21-year-old SpaceX intern named Luke Farriter trained a machine learning model on X-ray scans from a particle accelerator and pulled a Greek word out of a sealed, unopened scroll. The word was purple. Within months, a 3-person team decoded over 2,000 characters, revealing a lost philosophical treatise no human had read since the Roman Republic. They won $700,000. By 2025, researchers cracked a second scroll and found its title page, On Vices, by the Epicurean philosopher Philodemus, a book sealed for 2 millennia, read without ever being opened. And beneath the modern Italian town of Herculaneum, archaeologists believe tens of thousands of additional scrolls are still buried. Lost plays by Aeschylus, missing poems by Sappho, all locked inside ash, all potentially readable by machines that didn't exist 5 years ago. The only library that survived. When Vesuvius erupted, Pompeii was buried under falling pumice and ash. But Herculaneum suffered a different fate. A pyroclastic flow, a superheated avalanche of gas, mud, and volcanic debris, buried the town under 20 to 30 meters of solid rock. The burial was so sudden, it sealed Herculaneum in an oxygen-free environment. Organic materials didn't burn to ash. They carbonized into stable, charcoal-like structures capable of surviving for millennia. Beneath that rock sat the Villa of the Papyri, a sprawling estate almost certainly owned by Lucius Calpurnius Piso, Julius Caesar's father-in-law. In the 1750s, workers tunneling for the King of Naples broke into the villa and found bronze sculptures, marble statues, frescoes, and hundreds of blackened cylinders they mistook for charcoal. Many were burned as fuel before anyone realized they were papyrus scrolls. Over 1,800 scrolls were recovered. They are the only intact library from the entire Greco-Roman world. Every other ancient library, Alexandria, Pergamon, Constantinople, was looted, burned, or rotted away. This one survived because a volcano cooked it at exactly the right temperature to preserve it forever while making it completely impossible to read. The greatest paradox in the history of archaeology. Perfectly preserved knowledge, sealed behind an impenetrable wall of carbon. 2 centuries of destruction. For 250 years, every method of reading these scrolls destroyed them. In 1753, a Vatican curator named Father Antonio Piaggio built a machine that used silk threads and counterweights to peel carbonized layers apart, millimeters per day. It opened a handful of scrolls, but obliterated the outer layers every time. Sir Humphrey Davy tried chlorine gas and managed to partially open 23 scrolls while leaving them severely degraded. Another custodian simply sliced scrolls in half. By the mid-20th century, roughly 585 scrolls had been unrolled and 209 partially opened. But hundreds remained sealed in the vaults of the National Library of Naples. The texts that were recovered turned out to be Greek philosophical treatises, overwhelmingly by Philodemus of Gadara, an Epicurean philosopher and personal client of Piso. The villa was his working library, the greatest archive of Epicurean thought ever found. The man who spent 20 years, Dr. Brent Seals, a computer science professor at the University of Kentucky, dedicated over 20 years to one idea: reading ancient texts without opening them. His method, virtual unwrapping, uses microcomputed tomography to generate a massive 3D volume of an artifact's interior. Then software traces the geometric layers, isolates each one, and flattens it into a readable 2D surface. In 2015, he proved it on a burned Hebrew scroll from the ancient synagogue at Ein Gedi in Israel. The virtual unwrapping revealed the first chapter of the Book of Leviticus, the oldest Pentateuchal text found outside the Dead Sea Scrolls. It had sat in a vault for 45 years, deemed too fragile to touch. But Ein Gedi's ink contained iron, which shows up bright white on X-rays. The Herculaneum scrolls used carbon-based ink, charcoal, water, and gum arabic. Both ink and papyrus were carbon. Both had been cooked into pure carbon by the eruption. On an X-ray, the writing was completely invisible. Seals hypothesized that applying ink subtly changed the physical surface texture of the papyrus, microscopic bumps a machine learning model might detect. In 2019, he transported 2 intact scrolls to the Diamond Light Source, a particle accelerator in Oxfordshire, and scanned them at 4-micron resolution. Armed with a $14 million NSF grant, he set the stage for what came next. The Vesuvius Challenge. In March 2023, Nat Friedman, former CEO of GitHub, and tech investor Daniel Gross partnered with SEALs to launch the Vesuvius Challenge. They released the scans publicly, open-sourced the software, and put up over $1 million in prizes. The $700,000 grand prize required 4 decoded passages of at least 140 characters each by December 31, 2023. The organizers gave it less than a 30% chance of being claimed. In August, ex-JPL engineer Casey Handmer discovered a faint crackle pattern in the CT data that correlated with ink, the first time in 2,000 years anyone had identified ink inside a sealed Herculaneum scroll. Luke Farriter trained a neural network to hunt that texture. In October, his model surfaced an entire Greek word from inside the scroll, porphyra, purple. He won the $40,000 first letters prize. Farriter joined forces with Youssef Nader, an Egyptian biorobotics doctoral student in Berlin, and Julian Schilliger, a Swiss robotics student at ETH Zurich, whose open-source segmentation tool Thaumato Anacalyptor, Greek for miracle uncoverer, provided the geometric mapping the ink models needed. Working across time zones through winter 2023, the trio built an end-to-end pipeline. On February 5, 2024, they won the grand prize. Their submission annihilated the minimum, 15 columns containing over 2,000 characters, roughly 5% of Scroll 1. What the scrolls actually say. Papyrologists confirmed the decoded text was not a copy of anything known. It was a completely lost work, a text no human had read since the fall of the Roman Republic. The author was Philodemus. The subject, a sophisticated Epicurean argument about the nature of pleasure, food, and music. In one passage, Philodemus argues we should not automatically believe rare things are more pleasant than abundant ones. A 2,000-year-old economic philosophy, pulled from inside a sealed lump of carbon by a model that doesn't know a single word of Greek. In February 2025, the team turned to PHERC 172 at Oxford's Bodleian Libraries. Donated to the university by King Ferdinand IV of Naples in the early 19th century, the scroll had been scanned at the Diamond Light Source in July 2024. When the pipeline processed the data, the ink signal was vastly stronger than anything previously observed, so pronounced that in certain tomographic slices, letters were nearly visible to the naked eye. Researchers believe the scribe used an ink recipe containing trace metals, possibly lead or iron, creating intense contrast in the X-ray data. By May 2025, 2 independent teams penetrated to the innermost core and decoded the colophon, the title page ancient scribes placed at the center of the roll. The author was Philodemus. The work, On Vices, formerly titled On Vices and Their Opposite Virtues. A massive ethical treatise on vice and virtue, its title read for the first time in 2 millennia without the scroll ever being physically opened. The discovery secured a $60,000 first title prize, How the AI Actually Works. This is not a chatbot. It's not a large language model. It doesn't understand any human language. The pipeline starts with a 3D X-ray CT volume at 4-micron resolution. Schilliger's segmentation algorithm traces individual papyrus layers as they buckle and fuse through the 3D space, stitching patches using random walk procedures and Poisson surface reconstruction. The 3D mesh gets flattened into 2D. The ink detection models, an ensemble of Timesformer, ResNet 3D, and i3D architectures, analyze tiny 64 by 64 micron patches. Their job is purely binary. Does this patch contain the physical texture of carbon ink or not? They were trained on infrared photos of fragments from earlier destructive unrolling. When binary predictions are aggregated across the surface, crackle patterns merge into strokes, then letters, then words. Because the models operate on microtopography, not language, they physically cannot hallucinate Greek text. Aeneas, the other AI reading. Ancient Rome. While the Vesuvius Challenge decoded papyrus, Google DeepMind built a different AI for a different medium, stone. In July 2025, they published Aeneas in Nature, Trained on over 176,000 Latin inscriptions comprising 16 million characters, Aeneas restores missing text, dates inscriptions, and identifies geographic origin across 62 Roman provinces. In a study with 23 historians, human epigraphers working alone had a median dating error of 31 years, Aeneas alone, 13 years, together, 14 years. Historians rated the AI's parallels useful in 90% of cases, reporting a 44% confidence boost. Aeneas even connected a Sardinian altar to a parallel inscription near Mainz, Germany, a 1,500-kilometer link no human had identified. 2 AI systems, 2 different media, 1 civilization decoded from opposite ends simultaneously. What comes next? The current master plan calls for deploying portable CT scanners directly to the National Library of Naples to scan the remaining 300 unread scrolls without transporting the fragile artifacts anywhere. But the real prize lies underground. The 18th century excavators only reached part of the villa. The main library, potentially tens of thousands of additional scrolls, is still buried beneath Herculaneum. The obstacles are enormous: residential buildings overhead, constant flooding, prohibitive costs, and an Italian government moratorium on major new digs through September 2026. But the computational framework built by Seals, Farriter, Nader, Schilliger, and hundreds of open-source contributors is a universal tool. It can read any carbonized, burned, or damaged text that can be X-rayed, medieval palimpsests, oxidized lead scrolls, faded codices from any civilization. The same pattern that DeepMind's AlphaFold used to crack protein folding is now being applied to the darkest corners of human history. And every improvement to the segmentation algorithms, every refinement of the ink detection models, makes the next scroll faster to decode than the last. In 79 AD, a volcano sealed the only surviving ancient library inside 60 feet of rock. For 2,000 years, every attempt to read those scrolls destroyed them. Then a particle accelerator, a $1 million prize, and a 21-year-old with a neural network changed everything. Over 2,000 characters decoded, a lost treatise recovered, a title page read for the first time in 2 millennia, and potentially tens of thousands of scrolls still waiting underground.